I'd just respond. I think that we're all painfully aware of the changing environment in which we do our work. The fluctuation is in the population, whether it's the high school age population or now as it trickles through to graduate school age population. And we are not very flexible in our organizational structures. The example you point out as an executive program where all the money needs to come up front. Those are the kinds of flexibilities that I think you will find even the large bureaucratic big publics being able to now become aware that we need to change, but the change is painfully slow.
You had a question?
Yes, Mr. Miller, you pointed out that the value of the undergraduate degree has slowly been declining while the value of the graduate degree has increasingly been where people are focusing their time. How do you protect the value of that graduate degree as the numbers increase, as schools who might not be as grounded in things as a lot of you are, just add programs? I look to the undergraduate realm when you look at universities such as Phoenix Online and some of those. How long until those start to develop the graduate programs that start to chip away at what you have as very established?
That's already happened. That's not future. The master's and doctoral programs from Phoenix are making significant inroads, especially in education.
So how do you protect the value of, of your master's degrees and of master's degrees in general when it's at this point almost being rubber stamped by organizations that probably, at least in my experience, don't have the expertise or the experience of any of your institutions?
Well, that's actually astonishingly complicated issue, and I don't think I understand it all very well. I think that I have some confidence that the people who hire graduates are going to be concerned about the quality of the degree, and when if they get burned a few times by hiring someone who got a degree from a university they've never heard of that turns out to be basically a mail order house, they're probably going to rethink what their hiring practices ought to be. But those programs are causing a lot of trouble generally, I would say. For one thing, where they tend to compete with public universities is that they tend, because they are profit centered, they tend to go only for those things that have really high profit margins in them, which means that the wherewithal, all of us are obligated basically to cross-subsidize university. We do it all the time. Money is made over here and gets spent over there. Just where we can't have a university that's in any way true to the idea of what a university is without doing that. But you can certainly have the University of Phoenix without doing that, because there's no obligation whatever to any kind of ideal of what an education is. You simply look at the places where you can make some money. So we're vulnerable to them on precisely those areas where we increasingly need to have tuition dollars ourselves, because all of us who are in public education are increasingly dependent upon tuition dollars. And in graduate education at a place like Illinois, we waive a lot of the tuition. So if we start losing those dollars in precisely those areas where students pay us something for their education, it's going to be a real problem. But in a way, I think there's still a sense in which quality will out in the long run here. But among the kinds of problems that causes is that those universities are eating up in a huge amount of the federal dollars available for student aid. The Pell Grants and other grants that are there for students without large financial means are just getting gobbled up by universities which don't graduate anybody, basically, in many cases. I mean, they're not out to graduate students, they're out to enroll them and collect those tuition dollars. And they make just as much money on someone who enrolls the first time as they do for someone who enrolls the second time. And that really is a problem. It's just playing a very different kind of game from the one we're playing that's keyed to generating those dollars, as opposed to keyed to a responsible way of presenting an education. And I know this is a concern of a lot of Congress people. I hope that your folks are among them, because it really is a big issue. Yeah.
All right, I have a question that I'm still trying to sort of formulate here. But one of my observations seems to be the way we operate in higher ed and one of the recommendations of this report is sort of related to prestige. And so I was struck by Kim's comments about, wow, we have this great master's program, we have this terrific faculty, let's have a PhD program. And also, you know, at Illinois or Chicago, with elite doctoral granting programs, we often measure the success of those programs by what faculty positions at other elite institutions our doctoral students go on to. And in my capacity of Director of Career Services in the Graduate College of Illinois, I see students who are wanting to do a diversity of things, but also don't feel supported by their faculty, and actually sometimes express anxiety and even fear about having conversations about those career paths with their faculty advisor or even the director of graduate study in the program. And so there are lots of career opportunities for our students. There are lots of things that they can do. I could get on a soapbox and talk to you all day about that because I truly believe it. But the challenge for many of our students is sort of figuring out how to get there, and they're within a program where they often aren't supported. And so my real question is, how can we, as leaders in graduate education, be leaders to start to impact change, which we all acknowledge is very slow?
I think Martina's discussion of the program at University of Chicago and actually needing to bring in some other people for those students to talk to was really apropos.
Yeah, it was interesting for us where one of our deputy provosts had, through the CGS interaction with people, brought her then on campus, initiated, and it was very important to have conversations happen between these researchers about alternative career options and the faculty direction without anybody else there. So that those were, and they were in their disciplines, not across, so that people felt safe to talk. And it's that, because a lot of the faculty, what we learned over time, they're actually much more flexible than the graduate students certainly perceive it to be. But the faculty simply don't know how to talk about the alternatives either. And that's what we're hearing more and more. And you can also imagine here you are the faculty advisor of a doctoral student. You are always, of course, gung-ho about your own research and direction you go into. You're the master of the field. How do you then talk with a graduate student who wants to go into a different directions? And in that sense, you have to say, I can't help you. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not the world they've ever lived in. So the comfort level for faculty to even touch on a conversation like that is very complicated. So, but by having these conversations that were experienced as relatively safe, the faculty have gotten more comfortable. It doesn't mean that all our faculty are like that. I know there are plenty of faculty that aren't there yet. But it's a different conversation now on my campus than it was 5 years ago.
Because there are no jobs.
And it's that slow change process, and the more it becomes comfortable for our graduate students to approach their faculty, for us to have these grad conferences where these topics come up, and more
alumni brought back.
Yeah.
One thing is that faculty aren't talking about it, bringing alumni.
Yeah.
back.
It starts changing really how the conversations take place, and it's a slow process.
Yeah, we've had some of those conversations on our campus too, and I've been doing this for 7 years. I would observe, like you, that has been quite a bit of change. And I think sometimes there's a fair amount of paranoia, honestly, from the student's point of view. I think sometimes, you know, and not unfounded, you know, honestly, because they are in a position as, you know, wow, am I going to lose my funding?
Mhm.
You know, there's all sorts
Sure.
of things that are at risk for them. But we still have a long way to go as far as meeting the objectives here.
Absolutely. That's what's noticed earlier. We change slowly.
I think one thing we can all do is to support a strong, coherent liberal arts and humanities core at the undergraduate level to help students find their passion and understand their underlying value system. Because if you don't have those kinds of moorings and underpinnings, when you get to that situation that you're talking about, and I can't fault the faculty member that the student is talking to, but if the student doesn't know who they are, have some fairly refined understanding of who they are, then they're really at sea. So I I believe that at every university, the arts and humanities core, A, should be there, and B, should be done in a way that it really is coherent and that you really challenge the students to understand who they are, what their passion is, and how they can relate to the world.